I'm going to go ahead and start recording here on my end. Okay, I think we are live. Let me just make sure. There it is. Okay, perfect. Let me check. Oh, cannot have that happening. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Just going to check one more thing.
Take your time.
We're so professional here.
Very professional.
Checking all of the things. You're my first like live discussion, so that's just what that is.
Exactly. Finding our way.
All right. Hello and welcome to today's little live here. I have the beautiful Katie Emma with me, who is an evolutionary astrologer and the teacher and founder of Temple of Cosmic Astrology. And we are popping on just to record the forecast for August that is going to go in into my monthly August forecast. All right. Brain is moving really slow today, and I'm sure
it's a
Katie,
new moon, you know?
It is a new moon, and it's hitting my 12th house, as Katie was telling me before we started recording. So I'm feeling spacey.
Exactly. And so just embrace the spaciness, you know, like mine's in the 6th house. So I can kind of anchor more of the, you know, the Virgo sort of side of getting all the nuts and bolts and info into place. So no problem at all.
Perfect. Okay. Let me make sure this volume is totally off because I hear an echo. Okay. That is off. Yes. Okay. I think we're good.
Cool.
All right, Miss Katie. So first of all, what I'd love to kick off with today is just to hear what your theme for August is.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to always chat and connect with you, and also to everyone that's listening and tuning in. You know, I was sitting with all of the transits and I was kind of overlooking them, and I'm like, you know, what am I feeling from this? And the word that really came through to me for Leo season is resilience. And a lot of these transits are going to be making us feel like we're exhausted, perhaps, of how resilient we are having to be. We can also acknowledge and be empowered by that resilience. But I think it's also okay to just admit like how flat out and burnt out a lot of us are, and that it is so much more empowering to just be real about that instead of trying to suppress it and just be like, everything's fine, everything's all good. Because some of these transits in August, it's not all fine and it's not all good. And I don't say that to, you know, scare anybody, but it's just, you know, it's life and where life is at the moment. So you know, is that kind of lining up with some of what you've been receiving about August as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The message that came through for August was very much like a lot of the visuals, and even in regards to like the channeled words that were coming out, was like almost seeing yourself at an intersection with all of these vehicles going back and forth, and realizing that a lot of us are trying to make sense of what is happening now. And in that kind of trying to go back, but realizing we can't go back, we have to go forward. Yeah. And so much confusion in that, and so much kind of like the exhaustion of what it is that we've been going through, and then also trying to figure out what's going on now, and certainly the importance of rest, you know, and needing to really be able to take care of ourselves. The entire reading felt very chaotic, and so I think when you said resilience, I was like, yes, that is definitely what we're going to need for this month ahead, because it feels like a big month. It
is. And a lot of it's actually already kicking off today and this week when we're recording this, you know, now in the end of July. But I loved what you said about the visual that you were receiving of it been like an intersection, because one of the biggest points of August is this epic fixed cross that we are having between multiple planets in fixed signs. And some of that is already, you know, building at the moment with, you know, Uranus, North Node, Mars in Taurus, Mercury is already squaring it in Leo, Saturn is in Aquarius, also squaring it. And then we have the South Node in Scorpio to make this a big kind of cross, or, you know, cosmic intersection, I guess we could say. And, you know, how we move through that, like, it's tough because it's like we are being pushed by, you know, every corner. It's kind of like not quite knowing when it's our turn to go, you know. And when we sometimes like have that pause, that's when an accident can happen. Sometimes you just got to, you know, put your foot down and just be confident and like, I can do this, you know, it's my turn to go and I'm going. And that is kind of what this Leo season can instill in you, right? Because Leo is about like confidence and determination. And of course, the shadow can be ego and selfishness and me. But, you know, I wrote in my newsletter today that like, we have to be moving away from this, like, you know, this mentality, I suppose, in, you know, late stage capitalism of me, and like, what can I do to bring it all together for the collective, you know, and not from that space of putting all of the pressure on individuals, because that's wild and impossible, right? Because so much of what we are dealing with as individuals is systematic. But there is just a lot of the astrology is kind of hitting on all of these sensitive type of points. And so the new moon in Leo today, again, I know I'm talking July very briefly, but it is in the early degrees of Leo. But by the time we get to, you know, the Aquarius full moon in mid-August, it's going to be at 19 degrees of Leo. And so whereas all of the other planets, 17, 18, 19, 21 degrees of the other fixed signs. So by the 11th of August, that's the specific date, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, it may be early on the 12th if you were down under in Australia. Yeah, it's a fixed square. It's a lot. It's not your usual Leo season. And I think that's just something important to kind of file away, because pop astrology will be like, Leo season, you know, party, like dating, fun, enjoyment. And absolutely, like, you know, August is kind of that peak time of like vacations and sun and holidays. But it's like, you know, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, like sun and summer is coming along with like half of Europe burning, right? And other parts of the world, like, you know, is summer really something to celebrate the way that we have kind of been conditioned to when we are living in a world that like summer doesn't feel very fun anymore when it's like 46 degrees, you know, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I think that's like 108 Fahrenheit. I don't know, that it's miserable. Like that's not an enjoyable Leo summer expression to me. And so that's kind of really showing up in a lot of the astrology here. And so, like I said, that full moon in Aquarius, it's at 19 degrees and it's on the 11th of August, conjunct Saturn, right? So, you know, a full moon conjunct Saturn, there's not a lot of room to move. We're going to be feeling like restricted, heavy, bound, you know. Saturn is also in retrograde. So whenever we have a planet in retrograde, especially an outer transpersonal planet, it's not something that we wake up and feel every day, right? It's not like, oh my God, Saturn's in retrograde and it's like ruining my life. It's just that there is more of a, you know, an internal process that is coming up, or that we should be having a relationship more internally with the archetype of that planet rather than sort of full steam ahead and movement forward. And so for a fire sign season, there is going to kind of be less feeling of moving forwards than maybe we're kind of used to. Like it's definitely, like I said, it's not your average Leo season. So yeah, it's interesting to see that particularly that full moon is really lining up with what you've been seeing as well, you know, with the Akashic Records and stuff. I love it when it aligns like that.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like, one of the things that the records definitely shared in this message, and I think that does really align with Leo, is like in the midst of this intensity, this like traffic jam, if you will, almost that I
Yep.
was seeing, is like, is this importance to really take care of ourselves and rest, but also to really make sure that we're having fun, that
Yep.
we're smiling, that we're doing things that make us laugh so that it's not too intense, so
Yes.
that we're not taking it too seriously, because the energy is going to feel so serious. And I think
Yes.
that's what you're talking about with like all the fixed energy, because it is very immobile and very kind of solid. And
Yeah.
so in the midst of that, it's like feeling into more potentially of that Leo energy that is lighter and more fun, and kind of like, let's just go camping this weekend, or let's like, go do some karaoke, or, like some
Absolutely.
fun things in the midst of it to just kind of really help
Counteract.
to break it up. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and absolutely, like fit that in where you can, with the awareness that it's not as easy to be moving in those spaces this particular Leo season, because it is coming with such, heavy hitting um aspects, particularly coming from Taurus. We have Uranus, we have Mars, and we have the North Node here. So, change is inevitable with Uranus transits. But Uranus is in Taurus since 2018 until, another couple of years from now, the mid part of this decade. So it's like Uranus isn't super happy in Taurus, because it is the sign that is kind of like the least easy to kind of give that push that Uranus is all about. So there's a lot of resistance just naturally. People don't really know what to do. They don't know why they're resisting. They maybe don't want to resist, but it all just feels too heavy, too much pressure on the individual, and not enough like accountability for those who are more responsible for so much of what we are experiencing as a collective. And so, this is where the astrology really does become evolutionary, transpersonal. It's absolutely about you and your experience, definitely in Leo season. I mean, come on. I'm a Leo moon, you're a Leo rising. We're holding this on the Leo, new moon. It's, we're allowed to indulge in ourselves and our own enjoyment and pleasures. Like, absolutely, like Anna said, like, please yourself, do something enjoyable. Absolutely, because the tendency to feel just so burnt out, it's a fire element season. So, Mercury is moving through Leo and Libra this month. He's flying through the signs at the moment because he's preparing for a retrograde, which is going to happen in Libra, and that's not until September. So we don't have to talk too much about that now. But in August, the very beginning, I think on my little list here, on the 4th, he moves into Virgo, but then by the 25th, he's already in Libra. So, Mercury is moving at his like fullest speed and capacity right now. So even though it's moving through Virgo, which is another earth sign, we tend to think of earth as like slowing down, being more sort of wise and practical and conscious. Mercury is moving so quickly that it's kind of adding to this like fire season, like amplification of everything. And so Mercury in Virgo is also quite neurotic, overthinking.
I was
you
waiting to see
know,
what you were going to say. I was like, here we go.
Yep. Hey, look, I'm born with Mercury in retrograde, so I can be all of these things and more myself. But it's definitely a Mercury month where the likelihood or tendency to kind of be in our heads a little bit is pretty strong. Right now, recording this, he's still in Leo, but as of today, at 17 degrees, he is right in the midst of this fixed cross that I'm talking about that will perfect on the 11th of August. So it's actually pretty amazing that we're having even this conversation today, because it's really just anchoring into so much of what is coming and what we're here to kind of chat about today. And with Mercury moving into Libra at the end of the month, it's another, like, that's an air sign. So it goes from Mercury in Virgo and being quite heady into a heady air sign. So this kind of amplification of our thoughts, and the tendency to worry, that's more Virgo. But Mercury in Libra definitely, it's very communication orientated, but it's going to be preparing to retrograde almost as soon as it comes into Libra. Most of the degrees of Libra are going to be touched via the retrograde. So it's kind of like a funky space that Mercury's coming into. It's still a while before that retrograde, but
it feels very like I think when you said the word burnt out,
yeah,
that's what how I feel like when I'm thinking of Mercury's transits this month or going into August. It's just like it feels so much. It feels almost like my head is kind of heavy.
Yeah, it's a lot of tension, and it even feels like a bit janky, like it doesn't quite fit in with the rest of everything else that's going on, because we're in still a fire season when Mercury moves into Virgo, and everything else is in fixed signs, which Virgo is mutable earth, right? So it's kind of like it's all just a bit like it's fitting but not quite. And so this can make us feel like everything's kind of there but not quite. I feel like that's sort of what August is stirring up. And then another important thing that I wanted to mention is on the 20th, Mars is going to move into Gemini. And this is going to be a very, very extended stay, because I nearly said Mercury. Mars is
such a huge transit.
It's huge. It's really, I think, out of 2022, I think it's one of the biggest as a singular transit. Like a lot of the other major 2022 points have been like, planets in aspect to each other. But Mars retrograde in of itself is a very sort of standalone transit, let alone all of the aspects he's then going to make. But he's going to be in Gemini because of this retrograde. He'll turn direct, I think, around mid-January. And then I think it will take most of January and February for him to be moving direct through Gemini. So it's not going to be until like the first quarter really of 2023 that we're going to have Mars into Cancer. So this is big. The fact that he's making this move to zero Gemini, it's starting to, like, that ball is starting to roll around the themes of that retrograde. Now, Mars in retrograde in Gemini is going to specifically be between 25 degrees and 8 degrees of Gemini. So again, it's not going to be felt more until September, but I think it's just really important to note that that sort of sign shift is August. It's very prominent.
My partner's Mars is in Gemini, so
oh, good.
I'm quite familiar with this energy, and I'm like, okay,
and
it's going to be interesting.
It's going to be like 6-7 months of this. So yeah. It'll be big for him too, big for Mars and Gemini people, big for people with lots of mutable placements between 8 degrees and 25 degrees of any of the mutable signs. And then, with Uranus that I already spoke of being so activated by, the full moon in the middle of the month, then Uranus is going to station retrograde on the 24th. So again, it's like we kind of just get out of the chaos of this fixed square, this sort of cosmic intersection, and then towards the end of the month, Uranus is going to stop, and he's going to retrograde back, I think, to, I can't quite remember the degree, 14 degrees maybe. And that's again going to take us into January. So August is actually seeding a lot of what is going to be the beginning of 2023. So with that, all you need to do is just be mindful of things that are kind of stirring, appearing, shifting now, may not have resolution or clarity until we move into the early months of next year. So it's nothing that you really need to do or say or act or anything like that, but it's just that sort of consciousness and mindfulness of, okay, when I get to January, I'm probably going to look back and go, August. There was something in August and it's making sense now. And, you know, that also sort of takes the pressure off you trying to like force all of the answers or resolutions before that point, because that's how we end up doing retrogrades wrong, right? You know, a retrograde is meant to be for rest, review, reflection. And so if we're like pushing against the system and trying to, you know, make everything direct in that space, we're pushing up against the energy. And that's when life is suddenly going to feel like, you know, everything's working against us. But actually, we are working against the natural flow and order of what is required of us at that time. So we're definitely moving into a reflective period around Uranus and Mercury, but also knowing like in September, all the planets that are already retrograde are going to start turning direct. So again, I feel like it's like this sort of janky space that we're coming into. It's like one thing stops and another thing begins, and it's sort of, there's a lot of crossover with it as well. So again, like that intersection feels so spot on with that, because it's like, do I go? When do I go? Oh my God, like, is it now? Like I was meant to go left, now I'm going right. Oh shit, I'm just going to keep going this way, you know? It's definitely that kind of energy.
Yeah, that feels very aligned, I guess, with, you know, certainly with the records shared with me. And I've been thinking, like, you know, as you're kind of talking, like kind of batting that word janky like around in my head. And I think that really, that sort of energy feels, yeah, exactly what I might, you know, like kind of describe the energy, not only when I was channeling through the reading, but also just kind of like reading back through it. Because I was reviewing it before we jumped on, and I was just like, gosh, this is like, I don't know. I think people are going to read it, and usually they're a lot more, I don't know, maybe a bit more like organized, a bit more like sensical, a bit more maybe even logical a little bit, and the imagery that they're sharing. But this one just feels like
It's
so
all over the place. It's kind of like a pinball machine. Like
I'm like, I need to jump online and look up the word janky and see like what the definition is, because I'm
like
curious.
Clunky. I don't know, like, yeah, it's sort of like it's
well, it's like it doesn't work, and it's like it doesn't fit, but like it is like there's certain parts of it that are kind of aligned, but like not.
It's kind of like the mechanics are a bit off. So it's like it's the car's moving, but maybe it's like stopping and starting, or it's like when you're learning to, you know, drive like a stick shift, you know, you kind of you jump forward a few times before you learn to get into the flow. It's that kind of feel.
That's a really good metaphor, I think, like learning how to drive a manual stick shift. Like yeah, that feels really good, actually.
Yeah. And
good way of describing it.
The last thing that I want to touch on, because I know obviously we're being mindful of time here with this, is we also have a new moon in Virgo to wrap up the month. And so that's going to be at 3 degrees of Virgo. And funnily enough, it's going to be square Mars in Gemini, 3 degrees. So this is what I'm saying, you know, we're not in the Mars retrograde shadow in August. That begins in early September. But the new moon exactly square, like they're both at 3 degrees, Gemini and Virgo. Significant, absolutely, you know, and I think that things that are seeded at this time around, of course, to personalize this, right? You want to be looking at your own Virgo house. That's where the new moon is taking place. That's where you would be like metaphorically planting seeds. And so it is going to be making, you know, an aspect of uncomfortability, of, you know, uncomfortability, discomfort. Am I just making up words? I think so. Anyway,
it's all good.
Lady. You know, uncomfortable. You know, it's just going to feel like friction. Like, again, this sort of like this full moon experience mid-month, but this time it's going to be in mutable signs. And so mutable squares are easier to deal with, like easier, right? It's still a square, but because the nature of mutability is to have more flow, more ease of change, there's more openness. So it's not going to feel quite as heavy hitting, I think, as like the mid-month fixed stuff that we have going on, but something that will be sort of planted or that you are wanting to nurture through this Gemini space, 3 degrees Gemini, a lot of it will sort of have to be factored into what comes up for you in your Gemini house with the Gemini Mars retrograde. There is going to be some kind of like misalignment, but of course we know that that misalignment is often necessary to, you know, actually pivot us to where we want to be going. This is sort of that space of like, you know, whenever I think of even the mutable signs as a whole, particularly the Virgo Pisces axis, but I could say all the mutables, I tend to always think of like let go and let God, and how easy that sounds on the ears, but how hard it is in practice, right? And I say that as a Pisces North node, like that is like my entire life revolves around reminding myself to just let go a little bit, right? Like I don't have to be, you know, the boss of everything at any given time. And so energetically for all of us, August is wrapping up with this kind of sort of space of saying like what it is that you are working towards in this Virgo house. Like you have to have that trust and that faith, and that's something that has to be cultivated. That's not something that's automatically just given to us, right? For some of us perhaps easier than others, but for most of us it's a process of learning and integration and cultivating, and you know, moving through it as a spiral. It's not a straight line, right? Like often it's 2 steps forward, a step backwards. And we, in those moments, we tend to be quite hard on ourselves and go, you know, damn, like I'm back here again. But it's like, yes, because it's allowing you to go deeper into that space in order to move forward with greater leaps than perhaps you would have if you were just kind of walking that straight path rather than being open to the meandering that mutable seasons open up, because the sun moves into Virgo on the 22nd. So, you know, with the sun moving into Virgo, it becomes a mutable space to wrap up August. And of course, that's going to feel very different to fixed fire. So it's a real mixed bag this month, but it's incredibly sacred and empowering, you know, especially if you have a lot of fixed placements, like you're going to be feeling this a lot. And I say to you that like by allowing yourself to like let life change you, that is how you can move through this process with more grace and ease, because the more you resist, the less resilient you are going to feel, and the more burnt out and beaten down you will feel during this time. And hopefully from, you know, talks like this that Anna and I are having, this can kind of just be that like inspirational, that reminder for you in those moments that are absolutely going to trigger you. Like now that you know this, the triggers don't go away. It's just like, hopefully this conversation can pop back in when you're in the midst of that kind of crises or chaos. And you can be like, hang on, I'm here to cultivate resilience. I'm not here to kind of just react to everything, because with Mars conjunct Uranus, the likelihood to just want to react and explode and push back is super high. And in some circumstances, like that can be what's needed. But oftentimes a more gentle path can be a little bit easier on the nervous system, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I like to come at astrology. I look at it as like an empowered sense. You know, it's like, okay, give it to me straight. I want to know what's coming.
Yep.
If it sounds rough, okay. Now I'm going to set my mind, you know, or have the conversations. Like when I know that I'm coming up to like an intense week, you know, I'll share it with my partner and be like, okay, so there's a lot of tension this week. There's going to be some friction. So we need to be extra mindful and extra patient and extra, you know what I mean? Just like,
yeah.
And I think that that's a good way to handle the tougher things, you know, it's just to take that awareness in, not from a place of fear, but just a place of like empowerment, and kind of choose ahead of time. Like, okay, so my best course of action this month is going to be letting go and trying to go more with the flow, and not pushing and straining and requiring things to be what I want them to be, but seeing what might be here in that discomfort, or, you know,
absolutely,
what comes up for me.
Yeah. And knowing that like that will be revealed to you, you know, over the pretty much the next 6 months, and that's kind of how new moons and full moons work in unison anyway. Like, of course, this Aquarius full moon is a release point from the Aquarius new moon that we had at the end of January. So it's always good at the full moons to kind of look back, but know at the new moons that you're looking ahead, and that you can't just expect on a new moon that everything's going to just like make sense tomorrow. It's a 6-month process. And oftentimes, for those more advanced astrologers, like we have new moons and full moons that repeat degrees over the years. So like some new moons are related to a full moon that was 3 years ago, and so understanding those broader cycles and processes as well can be really helpful in understanding like your own relationship to your moods, your emotions, your patterns, because ultimately that's what the moon represents in astrology. It's just helping you understand those waves that you move across and how you emotionally react or integrate those processes.
Awesome. All right, Miss Katie. So kind of to wrap up, can you just kind of give us the dates again of like
of course,
the important things?
Yeah. So the major dates would be Mercury into Virgo on the 4th, the full moon and Venus moving into Leo. The full moon in Aquarius and Venus moving into Leo on the 11th. On the 20th, we have Mars moving into Gemini. The 22nd is the Sun in Virgo. Uranus retrograde on the 24th, followed by Mercury in Libra on the 25th. So it's a pretty full month. There's a lot happening. Lots of sign changes. We have 3 planets changing, or 2 planets changing signs, one of them twice. So whenever we have sign changes, particularly those days, like, we are shifting gears. And so those days can kind of come with a bit of a wobble, I think, as we get used to like, oh, well, Mercury was in Virgo. I was really living up here, but now it's in, Libra. And so now I'm like sharing it, I'm speaking it, I'm connecting about it, so it takes time to get into those flows. And again, always knowing like where these fall within your own houses is what can personalize this and make it feel not so like general. That's what can really shift your relationship with astrology, is knowing your own chart. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Katie. And I'd love for you to just share with us real quick what you've got going on in your world right now. So I think you've got a new program getting ready to open up and like, yeah.
Thank you so much. So I am in the process of, enrollments are open for my annual courses. So every October, I teach a first year and a second year course, so like beginner and intermediate. I just wrapped up all of those classes this week with my students from the previous October. So if you were looking to explore, astrology for your own self-development, for understanding it from an evolutionary perspective, I would love to connect with you. I keep my classes really small too. They're nice and intimate. We meet every week. And yeah, I think that's kind of everything that I have at the moment. It's kind of like my summer break. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting back into my classes in October. Teaching astrology is, the main sort of aspect of my work as an astrologer. So yeah, I can't wait to get back into it, because there's always so much, and having like that kind of structure and foundation to learning this can be really helpful. So I look forward to maybe meeting some of you in that space. Thank you, Ahna.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us today. We will be back next month for another astrology reading, but have a wonderful day.
Yeah. See you soon.